one for a while. Talking with Gerry about it, he's excited to be playing the deck this weekend. He likes his sideboard options as well.
He's off to a nice start. He only had one bye this weekend. Won his last round, the Charlotte's Bug Mirror, and now he's playing against the Boss. The Boss will cast a Gataxian Probe. We're going to see a Baleful Strix, a Thoughtseize, a Force of Will, a Brainstorm, a Polluted Delta, a Verdant Catacombs, and a Wasteland to get us started in round number 3.
All right, so I'm really excited to see Tom's deck because I feel like in Legacy recently, a lot of the combo decks have really been going to tier 2 status here. There's so much good like Spell Pierce and Rest in Peace and cards that hate cards and counter spells that we don't always see combo in our top 8s anymore. And I'm kind of hoping that Infect is a deck that can pick up this mantle as like really strong combo deck in Legacy. It doesn't use the graveyard. It doesn't. Spell Pierce isn't as big against it. I want to see it just take a fair deck and take it to the cleaners here.
Well, if there's anybody who can do that for you, it's the Boss. Again, he did win our Season 2 Invitational. He's been playing this deck a ton, as he's going to resolve a Ponder and keep with it before passing the turn back over to Gerry T. And Gerry will draw a copy of Liliana of the Veil.
Yeah, now Gerry's hand's actually really strong here. This is going to be hard for Tom to navigate. If you look at what the pieces it has in it, first of all, it has a Thoughtseize, which is great against any combo deck, which in fact really is. It has a Charlotte. First of all, then it has a Baleful Strix on 2, which is great at blocking creatures and trading with an Infector. And then on top of that, he has Force of Will plus blue cards. This is a pretty big wall that Tom's going to have to get through.
Yeah, and you put it best, really. He's got to get through this wall of stuff. That's the hard part here. Step 1 is this Thoughtseize. Will Tom try to fight this? Tom's looking at a Force Will and a Daze. So, he conceivably could Daze this spell. The other cards in his hand are 2 copies of Vines of the Vastwood, a Tropical Island, and a Verdant Catacombs. But, does he want to Daze this and kind of set himself back a land drop? Tough to say. One thing I do imagine here, though, Matthias, is that these 2 players were in Roanoke during this entire week. So they were testing with Brad, and they were testing with Todd and CVM and BBD. And as you see, a Force of Will going to remove the Daze. I imagine maybe they tested this matchup a little bit.
It's possible they played it some, yeah. So this is actually an interesting play on Tom's part. Instead of dazing it, he forces it, which means he values his lands really highly. So the decisions there were to force it, to daze it, or he could have even just let it resolve. It's not certain how much the cards in Tom's hand matter right now. He does, with the Vines, he has a lot of points of damage in here. The only card in Gerry's hand that he doesn't know about is the Liliana in Gerry's hand. So I think what Tom's hoping to kill Gerry with is an Inkmoth Nexus. But even then, it's going to have to navigate through Baleful Strix.
What I find super interesting about that Force of Will is that you saw Gerry kind of think to himself, maybe I'll force back. And if he forces back there, Tom's hand has 2 Vines of the Vastwood. It's realistically pretty bad.
Yeah.
And so Tom wouldn't mind if he forces back because that gets the Force out of his hand. Sure, he loses the Vines, but it's like, okay, like in reality, you didn't really take very much with your Thoughtseize, and you're down a Force of Will and a blue card. But Gerry didn't bite.
I thought there was a chance that Tom was going to let the Thoughtseize resolve because he just had that little faith in the cards in his hand.
Yeah. And now Tom is going to try to deploy a Blighted Agent that was just drawn, we think.
That's a pretty great draw here. It's the only creature he has that gets around Baleful Strix. I think that was the best draw he had available to him.
Well, the problem here, of course, is that Thompson does have that Force of Will in his hand. Looks like he's considering casting that and figuring out what card to remove, and it will be a Brainstorm. I do like the fact that Gerry is going to keep the Baleful Strix because that's great against Glistener Elf, and it's great against Inkmoth Nexus.
Yeah. And maybe that Tom's trying to protect information more than anything else. Gerry had an option there. He could have forced. He also could have taken 1 hit off the agent and then made Tom sack it with Liliana. And I think what Tom's done here by not letting Gerry resolve the Thoughtseize is that Gerry had to force back there. Because if he went for the turn 3 Liliana to kill Blighted Agent, then he just has to play around. Maybe Tom has a Daze, he just doesn't know. He doesn't know that Liliana is bank, that it's going to resolve. So the denial of information there made Gerry force back.
Glistener Elf is a draw this go around as Thompson does resolve his Baleful Strix. And Ross is going to tap that Savannah. A lot of the times you won't find Savannah in his deck, but he's got a small white splash that we will get to once we take a look at the sideboard here. Now, Baleful Strix is a fantastic card in this deck. Just a super value creature. It comes in cantrips. You don't really want to waste a removal spell on that thing because it's already gotten a card, and then it's, the great blocker because of Death Touch. I think it's everything that you kind of want in what Gerry's deck is trying to accomplish, which is to work its way into the mid and late game.
Yeah, well, it seems just excellent in this matchup in particular when you have cards like, the Infect deck only has so many creatures. It only actually has 13 Infectors in the deck, and that's counting the lands.
Now here's the Liliana, and this immediately puts Tom to the test as well. Liliana's going to come into play. That's going to tick down, so away goes the Glistener Elf, and Baleful Strix is even feeling a little frisky. Tom's going to go down to 15.
Yeah, it seems really hard for Tom to be able to stick an Infector on this board. Like, one of his Infectors will trade with Baleful Strix. It's very possible that Liliana will continue to eat the rest of them. And if he does draw an Inkmoth Nexus, Gerry has a Wasteland at the ready. And with all those things, I'm just not certain how Tom's going to ever get a creature at Gerry.
And now that he sees the cards in Gerry's hand, too, he's got an Abrupt Decay, a Thoughtseize, and a Brainstorm. This isn't getting any easier.
No, this is going to be pretty tough. You know, the land running Ink Moths is probably his best answer because that plays around Abrupt Decay and plays around Liliana. But he still would have to play around the running Ink Moths would have to get around the Strix and the Wasteland. So there's still some difficulty there.
Here's a Thoughtseize from Thompson. He's going to see not 1, not 2, but 3 copies of Vines of the Vastwood. So a pretty easy choice there for Gerry. Does still have that Brainstorm at the ready. Is going to discard Misty Rainforest to the Liliana. So Tom is just left with 1 Vines of the Vastwood as he moves into his turn.
Well, once you get rid of all the cards in the Infect player's hand, the deck really doesn't do anything. And I'm thinking Gerry will just continue to tick Liliana up. Eventually, he'll draw a card that nets him card advantage. He has more of them than Tom does.
Thompson's hand is so good he can discard a Brainstorm to Liliana. That's how confident he is right now as he plays a second Wasteland before passing the turn back. Ross's draw this turn, well, it was a copy of Blighted Agent, but Liliana will take care of that in just a moment, I imagine.
Yeah, and that's a really, this to me shows that Gerry's played this matchup a little bit before. The fact that he's willing to discard Brainstorm but keep second Wasteland shows a real respect for Inkmoth Nexus as Tom's only out. And Gerry's going to go ahead and just empty the hands then.
Yeah, you know, I thought maybe he might tick down Liliana to take care of the Blight Agent, but actually he's going to cast the Abrupt Decay to get it off the table because realistically Gerry's hand is going to be pretty empty anyway, so he can just go get those things off the table. Now he's also going to fire off those 2 Wastelands to cut Tom's blue mana, so Ponders and Brainstorms and stuff like that aren't going to be any good. You see Ross is going to discard and Invigorate, and sure, the beatdowns that Gerry's putting towards Tom are rather anemic with Baleful Strix, but if Tom can't do anything, it doesn't really matter how you win.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting play that Gerry's not holding back the Wastelands for Inkmoth. I mean, getting Tom off blue mana, don't get me wrong, is a real prize. And I think, actually, what's interesting is by taking Tom off a lot of mana, it's unlikely that Tom can even cantrip into a creature, because once he resolves a cantrip, who knows if he can cast the creature that turn. And if he can't cast it that turn, then Liliana gets it.
Putting him in the squeeze. Here's a Shardless Agent that will cascade into a Deathrite Shaman. Liliana's going to tick up to 6, and another attack for 1 is going to put Ross down to 10. Ross will draw a card for the turn. He does pass it back rather quickly, so Thompson will untap those lands, and that Strix will draw a card for the turn. Deploy the Catacombs, tick up the Liliana to 7. Ross will discard his Daze, and now it looks like he's going to take 3 points of damage. Deathrite Shaman at the ready to make this a 2-turn clock.
Yeah, the Cascade there was a pretty big clock. And Tom playing this out, but dead on the board right now with Glistener Elf as his draw.
No reason not to. Deathrite Shaman will remove a card from the graveyard. Ross will go down to 5. Thompson will draw a card. I imagine we'll find a way to get that Glistener Elf off the table. Of course, you know, the Liliana can get the job done. But, you know, there is kind of, you know, there's Dryad Arbor looming in Tom's deck from the Misty Rainforest, so that's why Gerry's taking a moment.
I want to see if he'll do it. No, he's in his deck, the Glistener Elf. Just a no, I'm going to make you kill me through all my outs.
And that is going to do it. Gerry Thompson does win game number 1 over Tom Ross. Shardless Bug up a game over. In fact, as we will turn our attention to the sideboard here, and you've got Tom's in front of you.
Yeah, well, we'll go with Tom Ross first in the sideboard. What is it that he can board in here? He has a couple cards that are pretty decent here. I think he needs more creatures. As we said there, Gerry was able to keep Tom off creatures. I wouldn't be surprised if he boarded in one of these 2 Necropedes that's in his sideboard. It does give him a way to answer Baleful Strix in a way that's not 2-for-1ing himself, or even just like, so I think more creatures will help him get around the fact that Gerry wants to kill them. Outside of that, Tom may want to board in a card like Sylvan Library. You know, he just needs to be able to reload. Shardless Bug is a great deck at grinding out card advantage, just playing, you know, kind of like the same strategy that a mono black deck does in Standard, which just kills your things and then draws a couple extra cards and continues to do that. Outside of that, I don't think there are great sideboard options for Tom in this matchup. And I think things, if he doesn't have a fast draw in this matchup, I think things could be pretty tough for him.
On Gerry's side, after a dominant game 1, he's got a lot of 1s and 2 in his sideboard. The 1s, Seal of Primordium, Scavenging Ooze, a Hymnotorac, a Thoughtseize, a Force of Will, a Gari Charm, a Knight of Souls Betrayal.
Gerry was super, okay, Gerry probably just to show off the sideboard here before this tournament, he has got a lot of spicy things in his board, and he's pretty happy with what he's sleeved up for this.
There's also a single Disfigure, Baleful Strix, Toxic Deluge, and then a Caracas. They're going on 2 copies of Pith Needle and 2 copies of Carpet of Flowers. I'm going to have to ask him about the carpets. I don't really get it at this point, but I'm sure he's thinking outside the box as he usually is. I don't think this gets any easier. Again, still Primordium is an answer to Inkmoth Nexus. Scavenging is just kind of a good card, a nice clock. Not sure if he's going to need it here. Hypnotorque can go after Tom's hand, as can Thoughtseize. We saw how effective that was in the last game. Golgari Charmanitis Soul's Betrayal against the all-1 toughness creature deck. Quite good. Disfigure and Baleful Strix as well. I don't like things for Tom pre-board, and I don't like him after either.
Gerry can really just become a deck full of 1 and 2 mana kill spells that can rely on the strength of cards like Baleful Strix and Liliana to be his late game. And I think that's kind of what we saw in game 1. He just traded, and then he used Liliana to generate card advantage. And I think that was good. You know, I don't see him deviating off that plan. His deck seems like it gets better post-board at doing that.
Well, you do see Tom's sleeves there, even though he kind of got crushed in that last game. He's using the Squirrel Confidant, which is available this weekend. This is the first time that we see our little furry friend here. So if you're kind of in the room, that means you probably can't hear me unless you're watching Twitch on your phone. But you can pick these up beginning this weekend here in New Jersey. You've got your play mat, you got your dice bag, your deck box, your sleeves, and then, of course, if you do join any Legacy Open, and we do have here one this weekend, you can get yourself 2 of the sweet Squirrel Confidant tokens. It's the, I don't want to say last in the line, but it's the last for this year of our Creature Collection series as far as squirrels are concerned. Squirrel Confidant now available.
Right.
This is my favorite of the bunch. It's not even close.
Instead of advising he's advising a raccoon. Is that it?
It's either a raccoon or a very large, angry squirrel. It's one of the 2.
Well, I remember because Stark Confidant's advising a big Orzhov blob thing.
Yeah, that thing's not happy.
Right.
Whatever that is. I wish it were like an Alms Beast, but Dark Confidant came before that, so it can't be an Alms Beast in theory. But either way, both of these things, be it Dark Confidant or Squirrel Confidant, are advising something, and it's not very happy. Available now as we do turn our attention back to our match. You know, Tom did win the Season 2 Invitational last time, you know, you and I were actually in the booth together, was that tournament. He didn't just win.
He crushed his way through that top 8. On the weekend, in general, people were not ready for a flurry of 1-drops, and Tom cruised through both formats. It was this, and then it was just his 1-drop red aggro deck.
Yeah, you know, the Boss Sly deck, but of course before Goblin Rabble Master was a card, you know, he was playing Boss Sly, and he really sliced and diced his way through everybody in the standard portion. One thing to know about Tom, he has top 8'd both Invitationals, which I had actually forgotten. He's top 8'd the first one in Season 1 in Charlotte. He won the second one, and we'll see what he's able to put together this weekend. I don't love his matchup right here, but you know, the nice thing about this tournament is you can pick up a couple of losses. That's okay. And, you know, Tom, I think, picked up 3 losses or something during the Season 2 Invitational. So 1 loss against a great player like Gerry Thompson, not the end of the world, as we'll start off here with a Noble Hierarch.
Yeah, Noble Hierarch, one of the most interesting cards in the Infect combo deck, in that it doesn't have Infect, but is actually, like, still, like, it's interesting that the nut draw out of Infect generally starts with this guy. We'll see the rest of the cards he has. And no Infectors in the opener. That's great.
Yeah, that's kind of what the Brainstorm is hopefully there for. You see his hand from the Thoughtseize, another Noble Hierarch, a Berserk, a Brainstorm, a Verdant Catacombs, and a Tropical Island. You know, I actually kind of think that part of the reason we've seen Tom keep hands without Infect creatures, both in this game and the previous one, is because of a card like Thoughtseize. Hopefully he can just draw into one.
Right. We have to assume that, you know, he's going to get Thoughtseized. His hand is not long for this world in this matchup. And he's going to go ahead and get some aggro. It's not inconceivable that the Infect deck kills using damage either. That can happen. It's not a plan A. But, you know, an Invigorate plus this Berserk on a Noble Hierarch, and suddenly we're looking at 12 damage.
Yeah, now we're talking.
Yeah, and then, so there are real plays here.
Gerry does draw a card for the turn. He does have a copy of Disfigured in his hand, but I imagine he'd rather use Disfigure on an Infect creature than a Noble Hierarch, so we'll see how he wants to move forward here. He also does have a Hypnotorque, but really, he knows the contents of Tom's hand, and for the most part, him's not great right now. He will take the opportunity to get this kind of out of the way.
Well, it's now or never on the card, right?
Yeah. So Tom will get to keep 1 of these cards. And that'll be the one he does keep, and there go
Berserk
the land and the
land.
Berserk.
Yep.
See if Tom wants to sacrifice the Verdant. He does. We'll see what he wants to search up, if it'll be a basic land, a non-basic land, or perhaps our good friend Mr. Dryad Arbor to keep the beats going.
Dryad Arbor is an additional point of damage here as it starts as a 1/1. Yeah, I think that's what we're going to go for.
Hey, it's not the prettiest thing I've ever seen, but whatever it takes to get a W.
Infect is one of those, oh man, it gets there, you know? It doesn't always know how, but
So I imagine we'll see Dryad Arbor come to the red zone unless Tom draws something a little more interesting. Well, he drew a backup copy of Berserk, so here's an attack for 3 with the Exalted triggers. Thompson's going to go down to 13, and all Ross can do is just pass the turn back. Thompson does draw his card for the turn. It looks like he's a little bit land heavy, but he does have a Brainstorm to kind of work on that.
Yeah, and that Disfigure he has in his hand is pretty strong right now as well. It can blank a swing for 1 turn on Tom's side, and you can wait till the Exalted triggers on the stack and then Disfigure. The dangerous part, of course, of doing that is that Tom could then do something like Kick to Vines in response.
Our Twitter followers are telling us at home that the squirrel is advising a panda.
Oh,
the squirrel
okay.
confidant, which actually makes sense now that I'm looking at the artwork, and I'm a little embarrassed that I didn't know that.
Well, I would just think the panda would be a lot bigger than the squirrel. I was still in woodland critter land, you know.
To scale.
Pandas and raccoons look somewhat similar. They both, you know.
Thompson going to resolve that Brainstorm, make it a perfect one with a Misty.
If you ignore their size, they look somewhat similar.
yeah, if you're willing to just ignore, you know, the relevant part. Thompson down to 12 right now, and because Ross is actually trying to put together a damage game.
Yeah, I don't think he's I mean, you never know. He could always turn and try to infect his opponent, but right now it is a damage game.
There's an Abrupt Decay to take care of a Noble Hierarch. Again, I imagine that that's an exchange that I think Tom is okay with, all things considered.
I don't know what the draw for the turn was there for Tom. Does he have him, you know, does he have him from here? We see Berserk. And we'll see what else. Remember, the only pump spells his deck has is 4 Invigorate, 4 Vines, 2 Berserk.
I mean, this gets a little bit interesting if it's Invigorate.
Well, Gerry gains, the gain 4 part of Invigorate actually starts to matter.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Right. The card's a lot less broken when you're trying to deal damage.
But, I mean, Tom is doing one of 2 things here. Like, certainly he drew something that's relevant, or he's in the tank to, you know, make Gerry think. And it looks like he might be in the tank to make Gerry think more than anything. So he does have a Green Sun Zenith in his deck, and you might be considering, all right, what am I going to search up with that? Or if anything, do I get a Glistener Elf and try to go the Infect way? Or to maybe get a Noble Hierarch and keep the damage going?
Right, I think that would be the question, right? Do you want to pre-combat? If you have the option, do you want to pre-combat Noble Hierarch?
Well, it's going to be an attack here for 2. And he's just going to pass the turn back, so maybe that'll get Thompson thinking a little bit. We'll see.
Yeah, Gerry with a Baleful Strix now. That, once again, still is a great card in this matchup. But if he plays it, Tom could Green Sun for a 1 of Viridian Corruptor that he plays.
Baleful Strix is going to draw a copy of Deathrite Shaman. See if Thompson is willing to cast that and maybe put his shields down. You see the land in his hand. He has a Creeping Tarp. It looks like he's got a Wasteland hiding out over there as well. He will tap a mana, play the Deathrite Shaman. There's a Wasteland, and he's happy to just pass the turn back. Wasteland, of course, an answer to the Dryad Arbor that's in play as Ross draws a copy of Spell Pierce.
Yeah, and this is going to be Green Sun for 3. And this is going to get the 1 of Viridian Corruptor.
It's actually a pretty nice one of them. You saw Tom's turns are typically very slow and methodical at the beginning, and then he moves forward with his action after he thinks about it. But you saw, as soon as Gerry played the Wasteland, Tom was just like, okay, land right away, cast a Zenith.
Right.
Because I don't want you to maybe get the idea of Wastelanding me like in my upkeep is a good idea because I need this mana. And there is the Corruptor that you mentioned.
Yeah, Gerry knows it before it's hit the table. He's going to go ahead and he bins the Baleful Strix. This is one of the few ways that Tom can actually remove Baleful Strix without just running a creature into it.
Yeah, this feels like a win, right?
Absolutely.
Instead of having to, as you said, like throw away something into that card.
Baleful Strix is pretty hard for his deck to deal with, actually.
Here's a Brainstorm to start the turn for Thompson. Ross going to look at the Spell Pierce and the Berserk, knows he can't do anything, so Gerry will draw a couple of cards. Liliana, the Veil, Polluted Delta, and Verdant Catacombs. Looks like what he's picked up. So a couple of cards are going to go back here, but as you can kind of notice, Thompson's hand right now, you see the Liliana and the Disfigure, not great. It's okay, but, you know, Ross is trying to slog his way through all this crap. It's hard to do, though.
You see the fetch land from Gerry. He'd like to get Liliana into play as soon as it's safe. Remember that Liliana is the late game here.
There's the Disfigure. And now there is an Underground Sea. Of course, Gerry using the Tropical Island to cast the Brainstorm and the Bayou to play the Disfigure. And now he's going to probably line up here with Liliana as well.
Right, so then he's taking his shields down for a turn, but, well, not even. He can use Deathrite Shaman to make mana here. So he's going to go ahead and use that. Liliana is going to Edict. And I'm wondering if he's going to, yeah, he's going to go Wasteland before Edicting.
Clear it all up.
Take care of everything.
And basically say, Tom, do your worst. That's a good start.
That's a pretty good worst. Granted, Gerry's that doesn't have any poison on him.
Yep.
So, and Gerry also still has a Disfigure. So
no, the Disfigure's gone. He used that to take care of the.
No, you're right.
The
Okay.
Viridian. Yeah. So his hand right now is actually, he drew a very, very good card in Shardless Agent. So of course we'll see what's in the mystery box here. That's Thoughtseize. So there is a Spell Pierce and a Berserk. Gerry will take one, and then Tom will likely lose the other to Liliana the Veil. But a Blighted Agent is at least a start for him.
Yeah, it's going to have to just keep attacking Liliana until Tom finds a way to pump. You know, it seems like once Tom gets under this heel of removal and plus Liliana that Gerry can create, I don't see him coming back from it very easily.
And the Moth Nexus will make things a little bit interesting. Thompson can activate the Deathrite Shaman, and he will. He will remove the Berserk. So down goes Ross, 2 life, down to 17.
So next turn, Tom can kill off the Liliana, but there's a bit of a danger here. Gerry, with that Creeping Tar Pit, can actually just race Tom, and I think that's what Gerry's going to do.
Oh, I think so too. And he comes for 5. Going to take up the Liliana. Thoughtseize is going to go away. And taking that up forces Ross to actually probably get into it a little bit here, which I imagine isn't something he's in love with doing. But the clock is very quick, as you mentioned, between Tar Pit, Deathrite, and Shardless Agent. So there goes Liliana. And all Ross can do is pass the turn back. Deathrite will chip away 2 more. And Ross will lose his Berserk from the graveyard.
Yeah, Gerry can no longer kill Tom's creatures, but it's unclear that whether or not Tom can win this race. It doesn't look like it at the moment.
It would take, I believe, a running Invigorates to get the job done here.
Well, I'm not even sure that works. So
yeah, here's
Gerry,
for
yeah,
6.
he swings in for 6 here, and then he has 2 Deathrites to finish the deal without the combat step.
That is going to do it, my friends. Gerry Thompson going to win this match over Tom Ross. 2 games to 0. Shardless Bug taking down Infect. It seems like a very tough matchup for Tom.